So today we'll study digital circuits. Okay, we'll see why we need digital circuits. And with this, we'll kind of complete discussion of cryptography, and maybe one chapter is left out, one topic is left out, which is called Kerberos, which will possibly study little later. Okay, and from next class, we'll start discussion about malware, which is viruses, worms, rootkit, etc. Right? Okay. So these are the references for the content. Note that there is one more book which I have added. Is this very nice book written by somebody from industry. I don't know how to pronounce his second name. Pleaser, Lawrence Pleaser, and Jonathan Margulis. Okay, this is a very nice book because they both are industry practitioner, and it does not go into mathematics and too much of theory, but talks in general about how security is applied, in various places. Okay, so these are the contents. We'll start with problem discussion on problems of distributing public keys and the solutions. Okay. Now, public key cryptography we have studied so far. It's very interesting, and it's a great method of creating a common session key or doing the encryption. Just by knowing somebody's public key, we can encrypt a text which nobody else can read, and only a recipient can or whose public key we have used can decrypt it. Okay, so that's fantastic, and we have seen that we can use this also for digital signatures, and we have noted that digital signatures are not possible using symmetric cryptography. Okay, because both recipient and sender have the same key. So if both have the same key, then non-repudiation is not possible. Hence, we have to use asymmetric cryptography for digital signatures. So what is the problem here? Now we assume in both cases, when Alice is sending message to Bob, Alice has a message M which she encrypts using Bob's public key. Okay, and then when Bob receives it message encrypted with his own public key, he decrypts it using his own private key. So P or SK, for example, secret key of Bob, and we get the message, right? The catch here is that Alice has correct or Alice has the public key of Bob, which is authentic one. Okay, now that is not always possible. Okay, now why is it not possible? Because man in the middle can be there. Okay, all right. So if the Mallory is in between, she can replace Bob's public key with Mallory's public key. And if both Alice and Bob wants to communicate each other, then Mallory can also replace Alice's key with her own key. Same way, when both communicate, the Mallory is in between, she can always read and change the contents. So it can be something like this. Okay, so when Bob is sending the public key, because Bob's public key has to be known to Alice, so when Bob sends it over insecure channel, in between Mallory can read this. When we say man in the middle, it means that the message does not go to Alice. It is intercepted in between. For example, Alice exists in a router. Okay, a router comes on the way, and then malice can read this public key and then produce her own fake public key, which she knows. Okay, so Alice will believe this fake public key, which Mallory has generated, is Bob's public key. Okay, similarly when Alice sends her own public key, Mallory in between changes with a fake public key. Okay, so what is the result of that? Result is as follows, right? So let's assume only one-way communication here. Bob is sending it to Alice. So Bob will generate two keys, PK and SK. Okay, this is a private key and public key, and this is SK is secret key or private key. Okay, so what will first? So whatever is sending, okay, okay, has in order to have a communication, the Alice has to know Bob's public key, right? So Alice can use Bob's public key to send a message to Bob. So what Bob will do is that he will send the public key. In between, Mallory will intercept it, and she will change it to her own or some created public key, which you call it PKM. So Alice gets PKM. Okay. Now Alice thinks that it has come from Bob, and then she encrypts the message with the public key of Mallory now, because she thinks this key has come from Bob, and then she sends this message, and Mallory is in between. Now she has the private key of this one also, right? So she has SKM. Okay, because she would have generated a key pair, and then she can decrypt it using her own private key, and then change the content to whatever she wants to send, and so let's assume that she changes it to M dash, and then encrypt it with the public key, okay, which she has created for Alice, and then which is, we can say, she encrypts it with the public key of public key of Bob she creates, which will call Bob dash or whatever, and sends it here. Okay, any question? So what's happening here?
Integrity is not maintained.
Yeah, so Mallory in between can do any kind of manipulation, right? Because public key, see, if Alice doesn't know that she is using the proper public key of Bob, and similarly Bob doesn't know that he is using proper public key of Alice, okay, then communication is meaningless, right? Anybody in between can manipulate, and can, like here, the Mallory will change the public key and give own public key here, okay, and then okay, and then this message will be decrypted, and she can change the message here, and then to M dash, and then can use Bob's public key, because Bob public key is known, and encrypt it with that and send it to Bob. Okay, so what will happen? Bob will decrypt it with own public key, own private key, and then get instead of M dash. Okay, clear? Any question? Shall I repeat? What is a man in the middle attack? Mallory is doing man in the middle attack. Okay, because this is insecure channel, so she can intercept a message, read it, and change the contents. Okay, so public key, Alice wants to send a message M to Bob. So in order to do that, and she is using asymmetric key encryption. In order to do that, she needs to know public key of Bob. So she may request that Bob, please send me public key. So Bob sends public key. In between, Mallory intercepts it, changes key to her own public key, and there is a corresponding private key also, which Mallory may use. Okay, and then she sends this change public key to Alice. Alice thinks that it has come from Bob, and then she encrypts the message with Bob's public key. So this message, and she sends it to on insecure channel. In between, Mallory intercepts it. Now this key is actually that of a Mallory. So Mallory will use her private key to decrypt it. Okay, and she will get message M. She will read it, and if she wants, she can change it to M dash, and then use Bob's public key. Okay, because she knows what is Bob's public key. Okay, she would have received, and then encrypt it with Bob's public key, and then send it to Bob. So Bob will decrypt the message, okay, using his own private key. Oh, just okay. Okay, yeah, whatever message is received, he will decrypt it with his own private key, which is this one, and will get instead of M dash. Okay, any question? Okay, all right. So it means now there must be a way for Alice to know that Bob's public key is indeed, in fact, PKB. So when she receives PKB, she should know that it is of this key belongs to Bob. Okay, so this problem we are trying to solve. Okay. All right. So now there is no way Bob cannot encrypt his own public key and then send it to Alice, because now in order to encrypt his own public key and sending it to Alice, Bob also will use his own public key. Okay, so that's not really a solution. It's a circular problem. So then we need to have something else, and something else is something that we do very often in life, right? Okay, so most of the marriages in India happen through what do you call is basically arranged marriages, right? Very few lucky ones have love marriage or whatever. So we have largely arranged marriages, right? So you arranged marriages also, it happens that you go through portal and get some, get to know somebody, download the resumes, etc., etc. Okay, and then you do some basic checks. And what is the question next? You may like that that the resume is good. That's not all, right? Then you need somebody to tell you that yeah, this family is good. So then you try to find out contact, right? You come to know one uncle who knows somebody who knows this family. So what are we creating here? We are trying to find out kind of creating, we are getting kind of certification, or somebody is assuring us, and that assurance is based on somebody else's assurance, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the way we also the same mechanism we also use in computers, and that's called certificate. Okay, so now, so systems use many techniques, and simplest one is trust on first use. Because generally on the first use, assumption is that Mallory may not be available. Mallory may not know about the transaction in the beginning, right? So first time when you communicate, trust the public key that is used. For the first time, when Bob sends public key, just trust it and then warn the user if there is a change in future. All right. And this is surprisingly, this very simple scheme is used in SSH and many other protocols. So you see, it's like this the first time, whatever you receive is good. Okay, because assumption is the Mallory may not, see everything that's happening on internet, and Bob, Bob is sending to Alice. She may not. Okay, so that's one very simple way, and this essentially assumes that attacks are not frequent. So assume that you are not being attacked the first time in the first time communication. Okay, but this is not. This can be used. This is being used, but chances of Mallory being there right in the first instance is quite high. Could be there. May not be very high, but chances are there, right? So second method that is used is web of trust. This is very similar to what analogy we have taken. Okay, so there is a boy who is looking for a match, and there is a girl, okay, whose CV this boy has received, and boy doesn't know about anything about the family. So so then he thinks that, well, let's find it out. He approaches one uncle who is in, say, uncle one, who is in the same city as where girl's family live, and then this uncle says, okay, let me find out. Then reaches to some other person, say let's call it say U2, and U2 says, yeah, let me find it out. I have one nephew who lives very close to this family in the same apartment complex. And then he say, we call it S2, and S2 in fact knows. Okay, so what's happening now? How the trust is being built in this way, right? I mean, this is the person most respected in the community. Or maybe like, in a community of, say, Brahmins, is a head of the same sect, some Swamiji. Or in other communities also you can assume similar, right? So this is most trusted person, and say that this person cannot be, cannot tell lie, etc., right? Okay, so now this girl's family trusts S2 because he is a very close friend, and S2 trusts U2. Okay, similarly here. Now this way the trust can be built between the two. Okay. Any other example you can think of? This thought came just to my mind few minutes back. Okay, think of other thing, how the way we use. What is letter of recommendation that you use for applying for your MS program or MBA program? So the university where you applied doesn't know you. Okay, maybe you got good grade, but just say one way of measurement, right? Then letter of recommendation is equally important, very important. Okay, because they know that from you are getting recommendation is a person of repute. Okay, and will not generally give wrong recommendations. So now you have letter of recommendation, for example, from your professor. Okay, a very general letter of recommendation which can be applied to any university. You take a printout of that And when you send your application, paper application, you attach that letter of recommendation. Okay, so somebody is vouching for you, right? Okay, so we can create this kind of web of trust. All right. And there are a lot of web of trust entities in commercial world. For example, certification authorities for commercial transactions include Chamber of Commerce, Better Business Bureaus, and so on and so forth. So if you want to do a transaction with a party you do not know, then you go to Chamber of Commerce, for example, and so on, right? All right. So now comes digital certificates. Now somebody has to now here vouch for the public key of Bob or somebody else's, someone's public key whom you want to communicate to or whom Alice wants to communicate to, right? So when somebody is vouching for Bob's public key, the person has to know Bob and then public key. Then only then it means that Bob's identity is known, and then Bob's key, and then it should tell that, yeah, this is Bob's key. Okay, so certificate contains two things: identity of the person and the key, which is nothing but public key. So public key and user identity bound together in a certificate, which is then signed by somebody called certification authority. So there is certification authority CA who will take Bob's identity and Bob's public key and sign this with his own or its own what? Public key or private key?
Private key.
Private key, right? This becomes certificate. Now CS public key, PK of CA is known to everyone. So when Alice wants to send the message to Bob, she sends M or encrypted version of M. Okay. Assuming that she knows public key of Bob, she can also encrypt it. Let's assume that she is not encrypting it. Attach this certificate. Okay, sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is a certificate which Bob has got. Bob can send this certificate to Alice. Okay, we'll look at those steps now. So this is okay. Right now, let's assume that this is certificate of Bob. Okay, now whom Bob wants to communicate to? Okay, and let's assuming Alice. So he will send this certificate to Alice. So Alice knows now, you know, public key of Bob because she can decrypt it using CS public key. So let's look at the example and it will become clear. Okay. So let's assume that we are doing this within a company, okay, or one corporation, and the Edward is a senior most manager. Okay, so Edward selects a public key pair for private key and public key. Edward posts a public key on intranet where everyone can retrieve it. Intranet is a company's version of internet, where the domain is only internet within the company, right? So, so it means that now internet everyone can read or retrieve Edward's public key. Now Diana, and she works under Edward, creates her own public key and private key. Okay, and if she sends her public key to anybody else, then nobody would believe her for some reason or other. Okay, they may think there is a malware in between who has changed it, but you know, Edward's public key is well published. So most trustworthy person, right? So everyone trusts him. So Dinah may want certificate for her public key. Okay, she puts her public key in a message together with her identity, assuming that Edward has thousands of people reporting to him, and he may not know who Dinah is, but Dinah may have her ID card or whatever to prove her identity. So she sends her identity along with her own public key, okay, to Edward. Now what Edward will do, Edward will look at the identity and verify it, actually Dinah exists or not. Okay, and then once he does it, the Edward will sign it by creating hash value of the message which he has received, which is nothing but identity and public key of Dinah. Public key of Dinah, yes, right. And then encrypting that and getting the hash of that, and then encrypting hash with his private key. So what is he doing? Dinah's ID and then Dinah's public key. He will get the hash of this and then encrypt this with his own private key, okay, which is SK of Edward. Okay, so this becomes Dinah's certificate. Okay, now Dinah can, so now people below Dinah can also, now Dinah becomes trustworthy person. The people below Dinah can get certificate from Dinah. But people may not trust Dinah so much. So Dinah has to attach certificate she has received from Edward. All right. Okay, so we create a chain of certificates, and then the person at the lowest level has to attach all certificates of people above that person, right? So let's see. To create Dinah's certificate, okay, so Dinah is creating her own certificate, that's my public key. So she will say, this is my identity. My name is Dinah, I am divisional manager. And then she will attach a public key and she will send this to Edward. Edward is her manager, okay? So Edward will add hash value of all this. We'll look at all this, then verify all the details, and then everything is okay, then do the hash value of this. Okay, and then what Edward will do is that Edward will encrypt it with his own private key. That is SK of Edward. So this is Dinah's certificate. Okay. Now, Delvin is a person working under Dinah. So let's look at the hierarchy: Edward, Dinah, and Delvin. Okay, so Delvin will do the same thing. Okay, Delvin will create this message where his identity is there, Delvin and deputy manager, and create own public key and private key pairs, put his public key, because public key is what that he wants to get certificate for. So Dinah will confirm identity of Delvin. If she is satisfied, she will create hash value of all this and add to this one and encrypt it with her own private key. But that is not sufficient, because Dinah, everyone trusts Edward but may not trust Dinah. So in order to do that, Dinah will attach the certificate she has received from Edward. Okay, this is her own certificate. Any question?
The certificate is going to be in encrypted form or in this form?
Which one?
So that certificate, Edward signs with private key.
Yeah, that's always is See, certificate is always encrypted with this. You tell me who has encrypted this?
Edward.
Edward is encrypted with a private key, right?
Yes, sir.
So this is encrypted form. Otherwise, anybody can manipulate, right? So now so Delvin can decrypt this certificate to get Dinah's key, public key, right? So how will you do it? He knows he knows Edward's public key is advertised. So we will use this public key to decrypt this, check if the contents are okay by matching the hash values. Okay, and then get Dinah's public key out of this, and then can do the needful. After that, he knows that this is Dinah's public key. So he can trust now Dinah's public key.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so let's look at the example. So here is a certificate hierarchy, right? Okay, let me see. Okay. So this is the way we create, Dinah here is, so anybody below Dinah can create hierarchy like this, right? So Dinah has got her key, Dinah has got her certificate from Edward, and then Delvin has got certificate from Dinah. Then Mukesh has got certificate from Delvin. Then Camilla has got it from Mukesh, and so on. Okay, so now Andrew, which is at the bottom of the hierarchy, okay, his public key is this much, so this one. So he has to send all these certificates to anybody he is communicating with, such that the person can trust this is the public key of Andrew. Okay, but for all that, everyone has to know somebody, the most trusted person's public key, which is say Andrew's. So this certificate has got from Edward. So Edward's public key has to be known to everybody. Only then this will work, right? Which is advertised. All right, question? So let's look at the example. It will become clear. This is the nothing but repeat. So I am not. So this is the way. This simply tells about notation. So we already use a notation. So we have. So instead of creating this kind of hierarchy, so within organization this can work, but between corporate etc. we need a certification authority. Okay. So basically this certification authority creates hierarchical trust. Okay. And the example we have already seen, like the one here, starting from bottommost, who is at the lowest end, I forgot the name. Okay, Andrew. So Andrew does not trust his manager's Betty's public key, so he will, but this trust comes from Camilla's public key, and this trust comes from Mukesh public key, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, so we are creating this kind of hierarchy. Okay. And finally, somebody is at the root of the trust. So Edward is the root of the trust, which is nothing but certification authority, root certification authority. All right. So we have certification authority entity. Certification authority is an entity that issues digital certificate that contains public key and identity of the owner. And then CAs, certification authorities, are the trusted parties in public key infrastructure. We call it PKI in general. So in public key infrastructure, CAs public key is trusted. So now the CA can also be kind of, it cannot be universally global. It can be, say, there can be a CA in Bangalore, for example. There can be a CA in Goa, and so Delhi, one CA, right? So it can also be hierarchical. Okay. So CA is the person who attests, like your certification attestation is there. So CA attests a public key contained in the digital certificate belonging to a person. Okay, so CA works as a notary. Like notary, when we go to court, notary will look at your certificates you carry and notify it, right? Say for example, the marriage certificates. Somebody will give, but before that, some other certificates you have to take it to notary, and notary will notify this. It will kind of give a certificate. Okay, so we have certification authority, which will certify Bob's public key and Alice's public key. All right. The certification operation, we have already discussed it now. So let's assume that users of a network are associated with the certification authority CA. So they are aware of public key of CA. So public key of CA should be known. Okay. So they trust somebody notarized by CA. So since CA is a trusted person, so anybody CA notarizes, other one we will trust that, or any user will trust that. Okay. So before communicating with other user, a user will get certificate for their public key. Okay. All right. So this we already know. So in order to do that, for example, Alice goes to CA. What CA will ask for is that Alice identity and public key. Okay. Now Alice will also have somebody under him, say registrar or somebody. So the front ending person is some registrar or registration authority, and then that will validate the ID. Okay. Anyway, so as a result of this, CA will know that Alice is genuine, and then after that he can sign the public key and ID of that with and of course if there is a hash of that with his own public key. So it will with private key. SKCA will be encrypted with this one, and this becomes certificate. Already studied this. Okay. So this is a process. Okay. All right. So this can, in addition to this ID, public key, okay, there can also be hash as we studied earlier, and this all can be encrypted with SKCA. All right. So these are all the steps. Okay. So now Alice wants to communicate with Bob. What will she do? Now we assume that Alice knows the public key of Bob. That is PK of Bob is known to her because of similar steps, right? So she encrypts the message with private key of A. So there is a message M. She encrypts it with private key of A, that is SKA. Okay. So use the public key of B to encrypt the above encrypted message and digital certificate issued by the CA. Okay. Use the public key of B. So what she will do is that this M, whatever she has SKA, add to this a digital certificate she has received, and all that she will encrypt with public key of Bob. So it will take a PK Bob. Okay, and B will do the reverse thing. We'll look at these steps, right? Okay. So steps are as follows. All right. So this is a digital certificate for A, Alice. Okay. Now she has her identity, her own public key PKA, and corresponding to this is hash value. Now this hash value is encrypted with certification authorities private key. So this is a digital certificate Alice has got for her own identity and public key. Okay. Now what Alice will do when sends a message M to Bob, this is a message for Bob. She will encrypt it with her own private key. Okay. Now it means that now Bob needs public key to decrypt it. Okay. Now public Bob cannot trust Alice public key in between because Mallory can be there. So now Alice also attaches to this mail public key of her, right? Which is nothing but in the form of a certificate. This she has received from certification authority. Okay. This is what it is. Sorry, this one. Now she wants to, okay. Now all this, what she has created this envelope, she will encrypt it with public key of Bob. She knows. Because Bob has done this process earlier. So she knows the public key of Bob. She will encrypt it with public key of Bob. And when Bob receives it, Bob will receive it in this form. He will use his own private key to remove this part. So what he gets is this one. What's the next step? Next step is that in order to read this message, all he wants is to read this message, and this is encrypted with the private key of Alice. So he wants to know the public key of Alice. Okay, so PK of Alice he wants to know. Now for that he looks into this certificate, and this certificate is what he does. He uses his own the public key of certification authority, because this is public key of certification authority is well published and known. So we'll decrypt it using this public key. So this part he will decrypt. Okay, what he will get is this one. Okay, what is the next step? He got this one, these two pieces. He will check whether the contents are okay with the hash value. He will do the hash on this one, and get the value. Digest, it should match with the one here, which is fine. So now he knows the public key of Alice. So he will use now public key of Alice to get this message. Any question? No?
No, sir.
Okay, please go through the steps all over again. You will understand. It is very simple. Now, what will happen? You assume that CA is in the same group. I am in Bangalore and CA is also there. Okay, so Alice is in Bangalore. So this is a Bangalore CA. So he wants to talk to now Bob, and Bob is in Delhi. So there is a CA1 and then there is CA2. Okay, if Alice sends the certificate issued by CA1, Bob may not trust it. Okay, think of, you want to communicate with somebody in North Korea. And, North Korea guy sends you a certificate issued by a local authority, you will not trust. Then this North Korea guy, CA, also attaches a certification issued by, say, somebody in London, certification authority in London. You may say, okay, fine, I can trust that. Okay, so this is how it will work here also, right? So we have, you know, if user B is another network, we can have certificate issued by that CA2. So basically certification are issued by, say, notary in, say, Delhi about notary in or CA in Bangalore. Okay, so we can use this method, right? So for example, so we can attach here certificate for CA1 and it is issued by CA2. If the other user, or if Bob is in CA2 in the region of CA2, then Bob will trust this. Otherwise, we'll have to go up multiple steps up until we get a common person, right? So we can create a hierarchy of CAs. So it could be something like this. So if you want to communicate to somebody here, you'll have to walk this path. Okay, all right. We'll have to walk this path until there is somebody who is universally known. The root CA is every certificate everyone will trust. All right. Just to summarize, in an untrusted network, intruder can show up its own public key as somebody else's key. So it means that there can be mallory and can change the public key. And because the whole asymmetric key encryption works on that, the basis that public key are correct. If public keys are manipulated or wrong, then this communication will not be possible. Okay. So now somebody must vouch for the public key of the other party or your public key. In order to do that, you will, suppose you want Bob to trust your public key, you will go to a certification authority and get a certificate for your key. But that certification authority may not be known to Bob, so you will go a further up. Okay, so basically your certification authority would also give the certificate that authority has got from higher up. Okay, and if that higher up is also not known, okay, then it will go further up. So it means that when you get a certificate from certification authority, then that authority will attach multiple certificates up to the root certificate. Okay, and when you send it to Bob, then Bob will find out if knows the root certificate, public key of root certificate authority, then can find out that your public key is trustworthy. All right, any question? Basically,
No, sir.
okay, repeat. Your public key is very important. When you in order to do asymmetric key encryption or digital certification or digital signature, etc., not digital certification, digital signature, or you want to do any kind of asymmetric key based communication, public key has to be, public key of sender must be trusted, and that trust come by use of certificates that is given to sender by certification authorities. That's the concept. All right, okay, thank you then.